Cool. Hi. So I'm Angus or Lams, the foundation lead at the Stargate Foundation. Stargate is a liquidity-based bridge built on top of the Layer 0 protocol. Hopefully most people know what Layer 0 is, but it's an interoperability protocol, allows you to send arbitrary messages between different blockchains. Stargate was the first application and still is the largest application built on top of Layer 0, facilitates liquidity movement between 45 different blockchains today, at least for the Stargate v2 protocol. Today, I'm going to focus a lot on what Stargate v2 unlocks for bringing stablecoins to new ecosystems. I think what we've built with Stargate v2 and specifically with Hydra, which is our bridging as a service module, is quite unique in what it unlocks for new ecosystems. And we've seen this over the past couple of weeks with ecosystems like Berachain, Abstract, Story. And so just going to kind of talk through what that architecture actually looks like, what it means for those ecosystems, but what it also means for kind of liquidity movement of stablecoins and also ETH generally within DeFi. So to kind of set the stage of what Stargate v2 was built for and why we built it in the way that it was, we built Stargate v1 3 years ago with the idea that native stablecoins, as in the USDC issued by Circle, was what everyone will want to hold. We have seen a growing number of hacks within bridging. I think most people have probably seen these headlines. The top hacks, up until at least last week when Bybit was unfortunately hacked, have all been related to bridges and the large amounts of capital that was held within them. And a lot of people attribute these hacks to the fact that they were using wrapped assets. And wrapped assets has now become kind of a word that nobody likes to hear. Nobody likes to say that they are using wrapped assets within the ecosystem. The truth is that a lot of native stablecoin issuers will not expand to the number of chains that we see today. I think Circle today are probably on 15 to 20 chains, similar to Tether, probably even less, up until their recent USDT 0 launch. But the fact of the matter is that we have enough chains today where wrapped assets will continue to proliferate. And I think the bet that we took with Stargate v2, or the point that we are trying to make, is that if wrapped assets continue to proliferate, it is not the wrapped assets themselves that are the problem. It was the underlying architectures that they were built upon that were the problem, and that is what caused all of these hacks. And so a lot of the top 5 or top 6 hacks that had happened, Ronin Network, Poly Network, BNB Bridge, as well as Wormhole, were built on top of upgradable smart contracts. And it is those underlying upgradable smart contracts that were the problem. It is not the actual wrapped assets themselves. And so, as I said, the idea with Stargate v2 is that wrapped assets will continue to proliferate. If they do exist, then the best place for those to be issued is out of the Stargate v2 protocol. And so what is Stargate v2? It's kind of 3 different points. A lot of people these days talk about interoperability and what does interoperability look like, who's going to solve the bridging problem, how do we actually fix the UX around it. And so there are a lot of different kind of buzzwords that different protocols fit within. Stargate fits into a couple different ones. So one, Stargate is a liquidity pool-based bridge. There are liquidity pools of USDC across the different chains that Circle have issued USDC on. So we have a liquidity pool with $300 million of USDC on Ethereum. We have a liquidity pool of USDC on Arbitrum with $100 million in it. And using those two, you can transfer assets between the two of them. I have a diagram on the next slide. Stargate v2 is also one of the very few messaging-based bridges. I think a lot of architectures that people think about when they think about bridges today are intent-based bridges. There are very few messaging-based bridges which are left. 3 of the panels / debates that I've been on this week have been intents versus messaging, and Stargate is one of the few protocols that is kind of left on the side of messaging-based bridging, and I'll get to that in a second. Stargate also uses OFT technology. So OFT is the Omnichain Fungible Token built on top of Layer 0. And we use that OFT technology to expand day one stablecoins to new ecosystems, which I will get to in this diagram. So as I said, as part of the Stargate v2 protocol, we have a bridging as a service module called Hydra, which allows new ecosystems, as I said, that do not have native USDC or native USDT to onboard liquidity in those assets into their ecosystems on day one. And so as an example, if you can see, it's probably quite small, but ChainX, in this, we can use Berachain as an example. We have Arbitrum, Optimism, 15 different chains, 15 different pools of liquidity on the kind of native pool issuance side for Stargate. And so from a user perspective, if you are looking to move USDC from Arbitrum or from Optimism into ChainX, Berachain in this case, then you can move your USDC from Arbitrum. It gets locked into the liquidity pool, And then a new asset is minted on Berachain called bridged USDC.E. Stargate built with the bridged USDC Circle compliant asset. The idea being that Stargate issues this asset on day one. If and when Circle wishes to take over the asset, we are able to hand it over to them in the future without the need of any kind of smart contract change. Anyone who is playing around in the Arbitrum DeFi ecosystem over the past couple of years will be very familiar with the idea of a USDC.E versus the native USDC. And ultimately, what Hydra unlocks for a new ecosystem is the ability for users to bridge unlimited size from any of the chains that Stargate is connected to. Obviously, in this diagram, only with 4 chains, but today Stargate V2 is on 45 different chains. And so again, what this meant for someone like Berachain or for Story Protocol is that the day that that chain launches mainnet, the day that they go to market, they have a canonical bridging front end where users can bridge from any of those chains with unlimited size. The innovation with Stargate V2 and with Hydra is that when you bridge, no matter the source chain that you bridge from, the asset that gets minted on the destination side is the same composable asset that you can use across all of the other ecosystems that we connect to. Previous wrapped asset bridges of kind of yesteryear of previous cycles would always issue a unique stablecoin depending on the route that you took. So, for example, anyone who has used kind of the portal bridge of 2 or 3 years ago, when you bridge USDC from Base into Solana, for example, you would get like a USDC from Base that would only have liquidity, which you could swap into the native stablecoin. The idea with Hydra is that no matter the source chain that you're bridging from, you actually receive the same canonical stablecoin of that ecosystem. And so again, the best example of this is Berachain today, which has about $750 million of USDC issued within that ecosystem. A lot of that used within DeFi, locked within different Boyko vaults. And the unlock for the ecosystem is, again, you kind of get access to the users and the liquidity across the 45 chains that Stargate is on today. The unlock from the user is that you can bridge from any of the chains that you start on. And so, again, for the ecosystem, you're actually accessing the users where they are today. They don't need to bridge down to mainnet in order to access your canonical bridge. This canonical bridge, Hydra, works from any of the chains that we are on. And then simultaneously, any of the assets that we've issued, so for example, chain X being Berachain, chain Y being Story Protocol, those USDC assets are composable and extend the layer 0 OFT standard. And so again, you can burn and mint an unlimited amount of USDC between those ecosystems, which helps a lot of different parts of the stack. Not only does it help the user experience, where again, the liquidity is always available, you can burn and mint an unlimited amount of size. It also helps all of the different bridging architectures that are out there. So as I said at the start, many architectures today look like an intent-based model. Ultimately, with an intent-based model, the solvers that participate in the ecosystem still need to do rebalancing. Having something like this, where the native USDC or the canonical USDC within the ecosystem can be burnt and minted at an unlimited rate for basically free, makes the user experience a lot cheaper and also makes the solver's life a lot easier, if there are any solvers in the room. And so the 3 things that I think are very important to remember about Stargate and about Hydra are these 3 things. If there's one takeaway that you're going to take away: compatible, composable, and canonical. So compatible, what does that mean? As I said, Stargate is built with the bridged USDC standard. The USDC that we are issuing on those in the new ecosystems can be handed over, and so it is not a asset that is owned and will forever be owned by Stargate. It is, the idea is that if the USDC asset grows to become large enough, or there's some agreement made with Circle that can be taken over. Again, if that is the case, if that agreement happens. Composable, as I said, means that between chain X and chain Y, and again, all of the other 45 chains that we're on, that same asset can be moved, burned, and minted between the canonical assets within those ecosystems. And so there's never a case where you start with the USDC that is, the native Ethereum USDC, and then you end up in some random bridged asset. These are not wrapped assets that are issued out of kind of any random bridge. This is like the canonical bridge for the ecosystem, and this is the canonical asset that you're using within, or that all of the DeFi protocols within that ecosystem you're using. And so, again, knowing that you can always go to the same protocol and that other actors within the space, solvers, can go to the same protocol and always be receiving the canonical asset is quite important. So compatible, composable, canonical. And this is a diagram from the first couple of days of the Story launch. The Story is new L1, the blockchain for IP. Stargate launched Hydra on Story, and I think this diagram as well as the next one, quite accurately represents what something like Hydra offers to a new ecosystem. So you can see that the flow of liquidity is probably a little bit small, but this is basically the flow of liquidity from source chains into Story. The top obviously being Ethereum. This is where most liquidity often comes from. Next being Arbitrum, Base, Optimism, BSC. They're actually not completely ranked in volume order, but the point being that you can now onboard users from every single other ecosystem. And again, you access those users where they have liquidity. And so there are very few protocols today that could offer something like a superposition to Story root at unlimited size, or even like a degen chain to Story root, or the Bera chain to Story root. But you can now do that at unlimited size, both at the like user level, but also at the developer and like the application level. And similarly, this is outflows from Story, and so you see again lots of assets moving down to Ethereum, but also to Arbitrum, to Base, to BSC, and to Optimism, etc. The point here again being that ultimately, if we're going to solve interoperability, moving liquidity at unlimited size and low fees between these ecosystems is how we're going to get there. There are not many architectures that enable you to do that, and we think that it's very important that Hydra and its architecture is kind of understood. And this is just a screenshot from DeFi Llama showing that what Stargate can enable. This was, I can't remember when I made these slides, but a couple days ago when one of the chains that we had launched Hydra on was onboarding a bunch of liquidity into their ecosystem. The second in line there being layer 0, which represents all of the kind of OFTs that are issued on top of layer 0. As I said, the USDC assets, or the Stargate's Hydra also works for USDT and wrapped ETH. Those assets are also built to extend the kind of OFT standard. I think, again, when people think about interoperability and how to solve interoperability, understanding that moving an unlimited amount of assets using burn and mint technology between these chains is actually the way to go. And any other architectures are kind of a stopgap solution to really solving the underlying problem. So again, if you're going to remember anything, canonical, composable, compatible, Stargate v2 and the Hydra bridging as a service module is important for new ecosystems that are looking to onboard liquidity. A kind of underlying point of all of this is that I think interoperability and bridging is an infrastructural problem, and the infrastructure exists today. All of it, all of the technology that you need to unlock interoperability for your ecosystem or for your application exists today. And so something that we've been saying a lot is that interop is solved, and we need to let application developers know that it is solved, and we should move on to the next problem. So thank you.